All right. This is Digital Commonplaces for IndieWebCamp Online 2019. And our facilitator, Chris Aldrich, is here.
I hope if I'm off of mute. I don't know. So does everybody generally know what a commonplace is or a commonplace book and heard of the concept before?
I have no idea. The only time I've ever seen Commonplace book is whenever you tell
Whenever
us
I
something
mention
about
it.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Same.
So it started in an era when books were much more scarce. So and they may even go back earlier than the 1200s. But typically people would get books, they would read them, they would be so expensive they would then either sell them to someone else or pass them back along or give them back to the person who loaned them to them. So more often than not, you'd have your own book, and this was in a time period when all books were done by hand and written by hand, so it didn't seem uncommonplace to have an empty blank page book that you wrote your own notes and things in. So typically you'd have your own blank notebook and you would write quotes or salient things from physical books you were reading or borrowing from somewhere else. And then you could keep that for your future knowledge and then pass those books back to the original. So there are examples in libraries of commonplace books that were written by, people like Isaac Newton. There's a library that still has, his original notes, or Leonardo da Vinci's commonplace books or notebooks and scientific notebooks are some of the ones that actually are still published today. God forbid anybody ever finds my old diaries and publishes them even after my lifetime. But so that's where it started. And I have kept a physical version of one for ages. And one day while I'm sitting doing IndieWeb stuff, I'm like, I haven't been writing in mine as much. And it's because almost everything I've been doing lately, I've been posting it to my own website, whether it's bookmarks or articles I've read, things I've come across, quotes, check-ins on my own website. People used to do a lot of accounting and bookkeeping in their commonplaces, which I haven't ever done, either in my physical one or on my online one. But essentially, a lot of IndieWeb stuff that a lot of us do on our own sites is essentially, that's what it is. It's just a modern day digital version of that. But I don't think as a group or a community we're doing probably as many quotes or highlights or other things from books as people traditionally did in old commonplace books. So I thought I'd throw it out there as an idea to kind of expand on what and how people are using their websites more than just microblogs, photo blogs, and maybe more traditional blogs with longer articles. And then having a word that kind of subsumes all of those things may make more sense, or may make a broader category of things that other people may be interested in doing. So I don't know. My online commonplace book for a long time was the 57 other silos I was using. And it's nice to have one place to keep it all and have it searchable in one spot. So I don't know. I'm curious how others may or may not approach using their websites for this kind of, and to a large extent, it's a lot of the stuff I really post mostly for me and for the future version of me 5 or 10 years from now that I can go back and search, versus I'm posting this bookmark for the rest of the world to see and care about, which is really what commonplace books were more about, but in a modern world where you can have interconnected commonplace books, maybe there's more value there. But I doubt people are reading my Commonplace book online to use it as much as I do to say it. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because one thing that comes to mind there is link blogs, right? Like, because when you think of a link blog, so you mentioned, not a lot of people put quotes and stuff on their blogs, but a link blog is kind of in that direction. So that kind of gives that same feeling. I think the only difference is oftentimes link blogs are meant for an audience and not for yourself. At least the popular ones are. But I think that's interesting as how that kind of lines up with that, where it's like, oh, I read this, right? Like, I read this thing and here's some thoughts I have about it. And it's like, if people want to read that, cool. If not, like, it's there for you.
Well, there's also a common phrase I've seen a lot of old school bloggers use, and I think I've started using the tag on my site in the last year to collect instances of people saying it and people using the phrase thought space on blog posts, or that, hey, I use my blog as a place for me to think out loud about things and evolve what I'm thinking about this particular topic or thing. And I broadcast it out, and it's available if other people want to read it and comment on it or give me pushback. And then over time, you sharpen your thinking, you improve your thinking on whatever that topic is. And in some sense, Commonplace books are that, and they were meant as private just for you reading, and you didn't have, there wasn't a public facing side of them. But in the connected world, when you can look and see what 50 other people are thinking about that same topic, your thinking on that topic may evolve more quickly, which then becomes a kind of a general knowledge platform that may not have existed. So it's, some days I wonder, should I have a wiki on my site, and or in addition to my site, should I have a wiki and use that versus, individual posts in a time-ordered setup. But at the same time, that's a 6 of one, half dozen of the other question. So I'm curious if anybody else uses their site in that kind of watch posts and maybe write mini reviews, which is that same kind of thing, or even read posts.
Yeah, so my stuff is a little bit more separated, but like obviously like I track watch posts on my site, and then separately from that, like I have written little mini reviews. Like most of the time when new shows premiere or when some shows have finales. But those I've just kind of posted as articles. So I haven't really linked the watch post and the actual like thought about the show often. I think occasionally I've done that, like where I will like I'll already have the watch post because I do that pretty much in real time. And then after the fact, I might write an article that is like I think, did I do it? No, I didn't. But essentially, like I will link to the watch post and be like, my wife and I watched, say, This Is Us last night, and I will put like watched This Is Us as a hyperlink to my watch post that shows what episode we watched and the date and time that we watched it and everything. So then the article is its own thing, but it kind of links back to the watch post to say, hey, look, here's where I watched it, and now I'm writing about it. But so I have kind of linked them in that way, but not as like the same entity.
Seems like, I think Tomtech started a rating stub page a week ago. to do kind of just that. And I've thought of that's how I typically did stuff. Was it more often I'll make a watch post contemporaneous to finishing watching something, and then a day or two later I may come back and write a quick review or a quick note of it. Which as I become older is helpful, because there's a few movies I've not rewatched knowing that, oh, hey, I can look it up on my site and I saw this 5 or 10 years ago. And I remember what a bad movie it was from the 2 sentences I wrote. Don't ever watch this again, to my future self. But even at that, a lot of that stuff in the data I do use kind of as a traditional commonplace book that I'll make it a private post on my website so only I can see it and only I can search for it. And I'm not sure how much or how often people do that for themselves, to have non-public facing posts for themselves.
I've used it a couple times to actually keep track of everyone that I voted for, like all the way down the ticket, because it's like I did all this research to figure out who's going to vote for, and I didn't even necessarily always remember, because like the people really down low on the ticket, it's like I'm not going to remember your name,
Yeah.
I honestly have not gone back to like revisit that.
Well, then you could do a review after the fact if they actually got elected, and then be like, this is how I voted a decade ago. How well did those people actually do?
Yeah.
Although you got to be careful you don't get hacked, and then suddenly somebody's got all that data.
Well, it was kind of funny. So that was actually, I think, the first time that I I had started working on private posts, and I implemented it for that, but I think it still showed up in a feed or something. And this is actually the 2016 election. I honestly didn't care, because it's not super private. I don't care if people know, but Christian in IndieWeb chat pointed it out. He's like, I don't think this was meant to be public.
You're like, wow. Give us all your medical data too. Although there's a lot of academic related stuff or research related stuff that I do post publicly on certain topics, because I know there's a few other researchers out there who follow me specifically for those particular bookmarks in that particular category. So they know that if I found it, they have to do less work going through and culling and finding the best stuff in that same area. Although at the same time too, I've offered to build websites for a few other people in hopes that they would use it the same way I would, and then I wouldn't have to do all that work and let them do some of that aggregation for me. But it's, part of having a commonplace book is having the ability to have at least some of it private in those situations where you don't always want to broadcast it. In fact, I've thought about doing more private facing check-ins and only publishing that stuff after the fact. I'm almost curious to do it just to see if it can be easily done.
Yeah.
More than I'm trying to protect it or cover something up.
Yeah, so I did that when I was using Own Your Swarm pretty early on. I was at one job and I was interviewing for my new job. So I was checking in when I did the interviews for my new job, and I checked in, and I think I marked it as private, but of course Own Your Swarm didn't actually have that. I think now if you mark it as off the grid, Own Your Swarm will send the visibility private now.
Yeah.
But it didn't at the time. So basically I checked in and then just immediately went into my website and changed the visibility to private. So it disappeared off my website.
Yeah.
And I think that was when I had Jekyll. So I was able to do that before Jekyll rebuilt. So it never actually showed it live.
Oh, and so you had no feeds going out.
Exactly, yeah. Plus, like I didn't mark to syndicate it, and so like I highly doubt that anyone from that previous company was like watching my website, you know, for
Yeah.
like the 30 seconds that it could have been on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did do those check-ins. I also when we were pregnant with our child, but we hadn't announced it yet, I did all of those check-ins off the grid. And so, you know, I probably since have marked those as public, because once we announced that we had a baby, I'm like, all right, now we're good. But, you know, those first couple months of pregnancy are, you know, hit or miss. And so
Yeah.
I didn't want to be like checking in at the OB, like, and saying like, all right, time for, you know, like checking on baby time, and like have everyone be like, wait, baby, what? So that was useful, and that was really nice because it was like family milestones that now I still have because I checked in privately at the time.
Yeah. Or if you're just checking in, you know, at the gynecologist with no notes about why, you know, then that's a
Yeah,
whole other set of questions that may
absolutely.
worry or have people questioning what's going on.
Sure.
But definitely, you know, I'd say probably easily half the stuff I post to my website is posted privately. And occasionally, too, I use it. Probably 3/4 of the stuff that I post is private. And then I'll come back once or twice a week and review it and uncover it or make it public after the fact. And doing that also allows me to kind of review over things that I read or things that I did or saw or had ideas about. And then it kind of forces me to revisit it at least one more time before I kind of let it go by in the river of things that I may not search for another 5 or 6 months.
That's actually interesting because that's one thing. We had so many sessions today now. Oh wait, I think it was in the micro formats for podcasting session. Rosemary Orchard was talking about if she ever did listen posts, she would want them to come into her website as private, and then that would give her a chance to like write up a little review or a note as to why she was, you know, posting it as a listen post. And so she was like, you know, if she ever did that, that's what she would want, rather than just having like me and, you know, Jonathan, who just like spam everyone that visits our website with all of our podcast
Yeah, 8 million.
posts. Exactly.
I do that too, and that's actually one of the spots that I probably do. I publish almost everything I listen to ultimately, but most of my listening is in the car, and it's not easy, and there isn't a really good listen. You know, if there were a good micropub client or something to do it. So typically I'll share it via email, and I'll do email posts to my website privately. But oftentimes I'll have a notebook and I'll scribble down 1 or 2 ideas while I'm driving in the car with a timestamp. And I probably don't do it as often as I would like to because it's such a pain in the neck to do. But oftentimes I'll go back and I'll excerpt or put a flag at a particular timestamp for, I listened to this thing and it was a 2-hour podcast, but the one thing that was most interesting starts at this time period and goes forward. And then I'll write a note or two about why it was interesting or not, and then publish it. But that's a good example of, you know, posts that are, I don't think I ever publish live immediately. It's always after the fact. But at least the timestamp of when I listened, the day and time I listened to it, is correct within a minute.
That's pretty accurate then, you know.
And particularly when you think about the density and value of what a podcast is, and not having you know, speech to text and simple search, you know, finding that, oh yeah, I heard this thing in a podcast 6 months ago. Which one was it? How do I find it? You know, episode 573. And more often than not, I find it because I actually posted it and wrote a quick little note about it. to be able to reference it. This, the same way Kevin Marks always does. He's always pointing to things he wrote a decade ago. Hey, yeah, we thought about that here, and here's where it was when I wrote it a decade ago.
That's crazy.
I want to be able to do that, but I haven't had my website for really quite that long, so
Yeah, exactly.
It takes a while longer.
I am getting close to that because I imported posts from Facebook into my thing, which also kind of, I feel like, goes along that commonplace thing. Like I went through and like I've tried to import a bunch of stuff from Facebook that's like things that I might have made notes about, on my website back in the day. But so I have posts from 9 years ago on my website that were imported from Facebook. So I'm going on almost a decade. Unfortunately, I will say 9 years ago, I did not post many things of substance. So I don't know that I'm going to actually want to link back to the things 9 years ago, but
Yeah.
I'm getting on the verge of at least being able to, and then I'll work on actually posting good enough quality stuff that I want to link back to it.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, is it's become even more interesting to have this kind of online commonplace book now that I've got an on this day type of functionality that I can look at things I bookmarked or had 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm like, oh yeah, I bookmarked that thing 5 years ago and I never came back to reread it. And
Nice.
but it makes sense in something I may be doing right now, or like 3 or 4 days from now, I'll see something else that reminds me of, oh yeah, and I just saw that reminder that I bookmarked this thing and then I never read it, and now I do want to read it. In fact, I've been going through, there's a academic bookmarking service called Site You Like that just announced it was going to die next month. And I had used it for a while, for like 3 or 4 months, and bookmarked a lot of really good stuff that I just didn't, and it's thick, dense academic papers that, I didn't have time to read at the time. And some of them were books, but I've been going through that and starting to read those journal articles that I meant to read I think some of them go back to 2008. And I'm like, oh, why didn't I read this? But in going back through it now, I've actually am realizing new value out of those, decade-old bookmarks now.
That's cool.
So, and I've seen 1 or 2 kind of academics or researchers who kind of wish they had this type of setup, or an IndieWeb type of setup, to save this type of data as they're doing their work and their research, where people are working on PhDs, to have a quick and easy way of bookmarking and saving data that they see and find around the internet, so that they can use it as a notebook for writing a thesis or a paper or a book later on. So, and I have a feeling that a lot of times people who, in the 13th and 14th centuries, people who were keeping commonplace books were doing it for just that, because they were, the few people who were actually literate and could read and write, and just couldn't afford the ridiculous amount of money for books.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I miss most about using Evernote, is just saving everything. If there's anything interesting in it, then you always have your own personal copy and it's searchable.
Yeah. Well, that's almost kind of how I use some of my website now too, is I've gotten away from using Evernote, and I've used OneNote for a while too. And all that stuff's on my website. And the stuff that isn't, typically when I post a bookmark, I automatically ping archive.org.
Oh.
So links that are in my posts get backed up for that date and time. So even if they change at a later date, I can kind of go back and see what it looked like on the day that I pinged it. So I don't need to save everything in Evernote the way I had been previously, where it was like an unending bucket of data. I don't need to have all the data, but just enough of the right kinds. So
I wonder also, what if you also had like a search index? So you'd ping archive.org and an index, so it would basically reduce it to keywords, and so you'd have fully searchable, but you wouldn't have to store any content. You just process it once and toss it out.
That's not a bad idea.
That's
You need a
interesting.
catchy domain name.
But the tougher part usually is the how do you make it quick and easy so that you can, and to a great extent, I think a lot of it overlaps a little with the kind of quantified self movement. The typical difference being, what are you using the data for after the fact? Are you using it to, track your, athletic and physical health, or are you using it to track and back up your intellectual health, so to speak? I don't think Isaac Newton ever kept a log of every jog he took. Although if they did, it would make for some pretty interesting public health data.
It probably would.
Earlier centuries. But the end result is different, but the physical, how you're doing the technology and the data storage and setup is roughly the same. So I don't know. What do you think, Gregor? Some of this stuff overlaps a lot of reading stuff we were talking about in the last section.
Sorry, I've been a little bit distracted reading Goodreads API documentation, and actually right now I'm skimming through a thread in their developer forum from 2017 where people are like, does Goodreads even develop API anymore? It kind of sucks.
Really? Yeah.
But I did find you can, given a user's ID, I can get like their basic profile, which does include like their most recent 10 updates. So whether that's posting a review or read status, and read status does include your progress, both the page number and the percentage. So in theory, I could extract some of that information.
How about highlights?
Anyway, I apologize. I haven't caught everything you said in the last.
Well, that's okay. Are highlights and annotations in there, or no?
Not that I've seen yet, no.
So my guess is if somebody's posting in 2017 that their API sucks.
It's probably not better in 2019.
Well, no, it was roughly about that time that they started adding highlights and annotations and dovetailing that workflow with data that Amazon held on to. So now if you're...
Well, there's another post. So this is, February 2019, where somebody's asking about a get quotes API method. They want to get quotes from a specific author / book. So I think that's different, I guess, than, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not sure how that works on a data side. I know you can go into Goodreads and add a quote to a book. So I presume that's the same thing.
Yeah, or add a quote to an author page, I think.
Right.
Although Amazon, the way they do it, if you're highlighting it and doing it within a book, it's automatically associated both with that author and with that book. And
wait a minute.
That would be a super useful thing to put into that people traditionally would have kept in an old physical Commonplace book.
So yeah, I totally missed because the dates are not. I don't know. I just totally missed the dates on this thread. Apparently, this thread started in 2009, and I was reading the first posts.
Oh, geez.
Oh, wow.
But towards the end of it, there's only 36 posts, so it's not that huge. It looks like somebody has set up a REST API that does something with it. I don't know. I'll have to look into it more. It sounds like it is possible to get quotes, but yeah, even just browsing their API methods, it seems like you have to do a few API calls to get certain things that should maybe be one. And I would kind of expect, like, give me all of the user updates or the read statuses for, user XYZ.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that's exactly what they have.
Yeah, it's definitely not intuitive. When I started building a JavaScript Goodreads API wrapper that did not end up doing much. What did I do? I could have it get user info, user.show, shelf.list to see what books are on the list, review.list to see what reviews, and then review.show by user and book. So I think I had to do like all 4 of those just to be able to get, basically my end goal was back a while ago, I would, every time Jekyll rebuilt, I would pull in my currently reading books and my recently finished books, and then I would put them as a bookshelf on my now page.
Okay.
But I ended up losing that functionality and haven't gotten around to actually building it in as regular posts. But so, I mean, it seemed okay, but yeah, it definitely seems like there was a couple different queries I had to do just to get like which books had recently been read or were currently being read.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed, and I started, I think I've had an account since 2013, but probably only in the last year and a half or so started using it more and more. But Hypothesis has a slick little setup for allowing you to highlight and annotate and tag. And they even have a bookmark functionality that they call it page notes, but really it's a bookmark functionality just with a different name. But they've got a pretty reasonable open API that I haven't started tinkering around with. And I've been using RSS feeds to take data of any web page anywhere, including PDF files. So there's a lot of books that I'll read in PDF form, and I'll put the PDF on my own website and serve it from there so that I can then highlight and annotate it. And then all that data comes back to me by RSS. So I have every annotation and highlight that I've made using that service. And I eventually want to get around to using their API to pull that data in directly, especially so that, I mean, most of the stuff I do now, I do as public so that I can pick up the data. But it'd be nice to make private annotations and have that stuff saved privately when I want it. Or if I want to keep it privately, now I just do it manually. But the nice part is I can annotate PDFs, and even if you have the same PDF, but it's on a different URL or in a different location, those annotations sync across the web. So even though I annotate my copy, your copy has, you know, a syncable version of all my annotations as well, which is a pretty slick set of data to have and be able to search for yourself. My problem usually becomes, do I want to have those as individual posts? Do I want to have them as, a single post with a collection of all of them? Or do I want to build them as single posts and then create some other UI to make a collection of posts for a particular book or work, or, maybe by author even? So many issues. So usually, if it's generic stuff for a total work, I'll manually collect all those. But if it's a quote that seems to be like something that can stand alone, I'll do as a standalone post. But I need to come up with a better way of sucking all that data in and then redisplaying it one way or another. And I haven't figured out what that is yet.
So can you run Hypothesis locally, or?
You can. It's open source on GitHub, so you can put it on your own server and run it separately and have your own version. Typically, I tend to use the hosted version. Although once or twice I've set something up to run experimental features that they've been tinkering around with. that they don't have on their public server setup. But I don't know. It's a reasonably good UI interface. It's not as good on mobile, which is the hard thing, but it's also the kind of functionality that it's sufficiently complicated and a pain in the neck enough that I would never want to build it myself. So having the ability to have a third-party company do it, but still give me all the data relating to what I'm doing. And they tend to be, they're old school web people, so they tend to be a lot more ethical with what they're doing with your data and how and where it's going and what's happening. So there is that, at least.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And there's there's nothing better than popping up onto like a, some news article and it's got 30 or 40 annotations on it. And you can actually see the annotation layer and see, hey, did somebody spend some time researching, is this thing true or not true, or providing additional information above and beyond what was in the original article. There's
oh, that's kind of interesting.
There's one I saw recently, Doug Engelbart, who created the mouse and a lot of early computer UI, wrote a seminal paper back in the 60s. And as an academic exercise, hypothesis and folks from 3 different engineering groups are going back in the last month and annotating this old article that talks, and it's some of the stuff he talked about in the 60s is still futuristic even now and doesn't exist. And it's interesting to see all these, academic folks annotating this old paper and being able to see what 50 different people think about certain sections. And, it's tougher to read because you got to read the paper itself, which is, dozens of pages long to begin with, but then there's probably about another 40 or 50 pages worth of extra annotations on top of that. But the nice part is the content that's there is very rich, so you get a much deeper experience out of it. It's kind of like, reading Shakespeare with a really good teacher can be a much more enriching experience than reading it by yourself, or you may miss a bunch of things because language has changed. But if you can read an annotated version that's got all that stuff embedded into it, it becomes a little more interesting and unique. So
that's interesting. You said the mobile one their mobile stuff isn't that great though?
Well, it's got their UI has a little slider that kind of comes out from the side of the screen. And so depending on how the page is built, the UI may cover up the article in some cases. So usually on desktop, it's not bad, but on mobile, the little slider comes out and pretty much covers the entire page. So you got to highlight the section you're interested in, and then you hit either highlight or annotate. And then the slider comes out and subsumes the entire screen. So it's not easy to write your notes necessarily without being able to look back at the original.
That makes sense.
But it's still way better than a UI I would be able to design myself. So it's not horrific.
Oh, okay.
So
interesting.
But the nice part too is they're very open to feedback and what can we add. In fact, I've bookmarked a particular post that I need to go back and I want to add micro formats to how they're marking things up. And I think if we can do that and give them a few examples, they'll actually go back in the code and actively add micro formats for everything. That then makes it a whole lot easier for parsers to pick up. So they're super IndieWeb friendly. I need to spend the time to do the work to have them add that stuff in. And they've even considered doing adding web mentions, because the tough part, I may go to your website, Eddie, and I could highlight or annotate things and post it, and you as the site owner would never know it exists unless you know Hypothesis exists. And even then you wouldn't necessarily get a notification of it.
Yeah. Like I would have to go to Hypothesis and look to see that was there.
Yeah, specifically. But if I highlighted it and annotated it in their service, and their service would send web mentions or notifications automatically, then you would see that and know that, and they would appear as comments on your page. Or
that's pretty cool.
Foreseeably would or could, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And then, even better, sometime off in the far distant future, using it as either a micropub client or web mention client of some sort may be an interesting little byproduct. But the nice part is it makes it easier to bookmark, highlight, and annotate almost anything on the web, extract all the data out, and put it on your website almost instantaneously. Which, when you're trying to build a commonplace book, is a super useful thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Greg, did you show up to remind us that we need to be moving on to the next session?
It is now, 10 of 1?
Yeah.
And looking at the schedule, no, I just showed up because dinner's over. And so I got to be like a tiny window before I have to throw 3 kids in the shower.
And you're actually good, Chris, because this was the last session of this chunk.
The block.
So yeah, this block. So there is no end. We just go on for this till another 4 or 5 hours till the WordPress starts.
There you go. Well, you might want to hit the stop recording button, maybe.
Probably. I guess that's probably a good time for me to go ahead and stop the official broadcast. I think we've talked digital commonplace pretty good, and so Hypothesis, good tool to help make a commonplace book. I'm gonna have to look into that more.
It is its own silo, but I think the nice part is with open APIs and their willingness and ability to add pieces.
Did you see what I did, at least just using John's tool? I just grabbed the HTML and I have to do it every now and again because it's not a feed.
Yeah.
But I just grab my RSS feed and then pump it and then throw it into, and then that's how I have the annotations on my website.
I use if this then that.
Yeah, yours working very well too.
Suck in everything.
I'll go back and watch the session because you guys probably covered all this, so I don't want him to talk it say the same thing twice. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
I don't know. Do you use your site as a commonplace in some sense?
I've been starting more, but I've also been fooling around with just doing when I bookmark a page, and I didn't know about I'll bookmark a page on Quick Thoughts. I've been doing this more and more, and then if I filter just through my bookmark pages, just doing block quotes and keeping all my annotations there. So there is a little bit of a hole in my Hypothesis feed because I'm doing a lot. As I'm going through and bookmarking research, then I'll go back to those bookmarks, then I'll read it, grab those quotes, and then on my main website, that's when I'll write an article, and I'll be grabbing the quotes and mixing them back into my long form writing.
So you're doing kind of what Ian does, and you've got a breadcrumb site, and then here's my more polished writing. After all the research, and you don't have to see all the sausage being made.
But you can. If you want to, the sausage factory is wide open, and go back or just take a bite of the sandwich when you're done.
Yeah,
that's both options. That's kind of what I want my commonplace book to be, a sausage factory. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's nice if you're working or you've got 1 or 2 colleagues that are interested in the same sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't have to do all the heavy lifting of research and discovery yourself. You can rely on, hey, Greg saw these things already.
Yeah, and I'm a horrible bookmarker. I'm not and I come from out of education. These are people who've that's I was looking at Live Binder and people that book Digo sites that have thousands, hundreds, people have crazy amounts Chris, the amount of bookmarks you have.
Yeah.
And categorized down to librarian levels that probably Gregor has, but I'm not. I'm a bad organizer. But now that I just do it for my website, I get better at it. Because I'm keeping it all at home. I don't have to worry about like, is it on Evernote? Is it on Pinboard? Is it like, I swear half the discussions I have are people doing like, what's my Pinboard replacement? Should I give up on Evernote? Should I keep it all at home?
Or my problem too. Usually it's more messenger apps or notifications. Yeah, I got 57 apps on my phone that all send me notifications that, whether they're like messengers or text message or hangouts and somebody will text message me, and if I make it disappear for even a minute, then I have to spend 20 minutes figuring out which app that notification came from so I can go back and respond to them. And
this is why I'm stubborn about not installing those messaging apps.
Yeah, it's a fixable problem. Just get down to 5 apps.
It used to be the same problem I had on the Commonplace book side was, I know I saw this thing and I posted it to somewhere. I bookmarked it. Did I bookmark it on, Magnolia? Did I send it to Twitter? Is it on Pinterest? Is it on, which service did I bookmark the thing on so I can go find it and search for it? And, 201, all of these services have, Twitter's got at least reasonable search, but, Facebook is horrible. And you can't find the things that you posted before. And if you have it all on your site in one spot,
WordPress search, like whatever search engine, like the search built into WordPress is good too. Like
it's pretty decent. I still want to do
way better than what I have with Known. Like I can't really search well at all. Like unless it's a tag, but I like WordPress's search.
Yeah.
You can really, we're still live, but just if anybody didn't know that, but
I was gonna stop it, but then you guys sounded like you were still in Commonplace book, so I left it.
So that's kind of what. And then Chris, I did add my Commonplace tags at the bottom, but that's kind of how I've been trying to trace my research. Like you can kind of look at my last article on my blog post, and then if you look at the innovation tag, you can watch my thinking. And I've been trying to and for my students too, like this is how you learn to write. Like I have to show like they're learning how to like write in college. So watch me write, and maybe you'll pick up an idea or two.
Yeah, so I am kind of half tempted to take something like David's syndication links, rename it, change 2 of the tags, and use it as a kind of a hat tip field on my site, so that when I bookmark something because I saw it somewhere else,
you can call those links.
Well, it's links to the thing. So if I see something on your website and I bookmark an article because you had it, then having an easy way to say a hat tip to Greg from this thing, and then when I come back 6 months from now, trying to figure out how did I come across this thing originally. But I think also doing that.
Well, I think that's where it goes back to the read post. That's use your P category for that. It'd be P category, hat tip, and then and then have my H card.
Yeah. But I think there's a way to repurpose what syndication links does to do exactly that thing and have a field of.
Or is that an H site?
Yeah, one or the other. You hat tip of.
All right. With that, I will end the official.
Take us not live.
Yeah, I was about to say. With that, we will go ahead and stop the broadcast. Thanks for watching along. Anyone who's been watching along on YouTube, and the next sessions, you can check the IndieWeb Wiki at indieweb.org/2019/online/schedule. And we've got all the times for the upcoming sessions there. Thanks for listening.